to Sticking to the Truth with Juleen Jackson and Debbie Jansen. Hi, Juleen. I'm so excited to see you. We both have had a very busy month. We've faced overwhelming daily tasks, family deaths, meetings, trips, and a lot of work. But God is faithful, and we are back and ready to tackle some lies. Now, I have some Democrat friends, and so do you, Juleen. But watching the news and seeing the violence, destruction, and chaos causes me to be determined to find a solution. There's a lot we could say, but maybe our thoughts and frustrations would only cause more anxiety than ever. So, this is for our listeners, Juleen. Juleen and I have decided to take some time to handle the rising deception problem that's in our country. We must share the truth about our history and our country. Yes, we will still mention the problems of today, but we must fight against the lies of socialism and communism. Last night, all except one socialist who ran in primaries across this country, all of them except for one won their primary. That's scary. And this is disastrous for our country. Sometimes it's important to fight against daily lies. Other times it's important to define and fight for the absolute truth. And that's what we're going to do, Juleen. We're going to fight for that truth. We're going to tell you the truth about certain terms and about what's going on that makes maybe people think that socialism or communism is okay when it's not. So, Juleen, how are you doing today?
Well, wow, that's a lot to think about. I think
It
compared to
is.
what you just said, I think I'm doing all right. All I know is when I look at you and your backdrop, I'm in Washington, D.C., you're in Ohio. I see your red, white, and blue stars, the 250 commemoration, the great quote of Ronald Reagan to teach up our children. It's not given to them in the bloodstream. They've got to learn how to love and defend and fight for this nation, and the
Yes.
beautiful flag in the background. That all fills me with hope and gives me that freedom fighting spirit. I mean, we are into summer, July 1. We are just days away from our pinnacle celebration of our 250th birthday of America. Deb, I was down on the mall in Washington, D.C. last Wednesday when he was there, he spoke, he kicked off this 16-day great American state fair that's being held in downtown Washington, D.C. on the mall area, it's called, where the Smithsonian Museum's, this great grassy area, and great celebrations have taken place there, protests through the years. And he was wonderful, right? There was like magnificent flyovers, displays of our beautiful, strong military and beautiful music. And he spoke about our founding nation and our founding fathers and our ideals upon which our nation was founded. And it's a really unique thing that's going on in Washington, D.C. right now. I mean, every day there are daily themes. Me and our little grandbaby and our son-in-law and daughter and husband went down again on Monday. It was Health and Wellness Day. We like health and wellness in our family. And there's huge Ferris wheels and um 3 stages, wonderful concerts, and a lot of the states have booths there, and there's rodeos. And, Deb, there was even a tent for Christian music that's being played nonstop, kind of revival tent, and they had a baptismal font on the National Mall. I mean, I've lived here almost 30 years. I'm like, wow, I'm liking this version of Washington, D.C. right now. And clearly, people that are there are freedom-loving, God-fearing people. And there's a really sweet
Yes.
spirit right now in Washington, D.C. And of course, President Trump is going to speak again at the Washington Monument on the 4th of July. We've got our tickets. We're going to be down there. There'll be, a beautiful presentation of fireworks 10 times greater than he's ever said we've ever before. Everything with Trump is 10 times greater than ever before. And the great air shows and music and so forth. And so, this is really, Deb, a once in a generation celebration that
Yes.
is going to showcase our states and our territories into really kind of a singular World Fair event. So it's going to end July 10th. So there's still time to come on down, if you can. But, getting us to this point, and then we're going to get into what you've talked about, all these socialists that are winning these primaries.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
sat I sat next to a little lady from Buffalo, New York last Wednesday at this kickoff celebration as we were waiting for, the event to start. She had said every election in Manhattan that the day before, because I guess their primaries was 1 week ago. She said every one of the socialist candidates won. And it's primarily young people under 30 that don't really, you know the adverse effects of communism and socialism that are voting, these
Yeah.
offers of
Yeah.
free things, this entitlement generation. And so, these are, and she was just beautiful Christian grandmother, 9 grandchildren, librarian at a Christian school, and told me about all the big displays of the 250th, commemoration of our country that she's had in the library and in her school this last year. There's a lot to be hopeful for, right?
Yes. Yes.
And so I think we can't just fall into this trap that we're going to hell in a handbag. But there's a lot going on in all of our lives. And so we just to dig deep and go, well, where can I have the greatest impact and influence? And we just, Deb, got our last little babe out the door. We have 5 children, and she graduated, and she's in her second day of serving a year-and-a-half church service mission in Chicago,
Wow.
Illinois. And so, we had all the 5 kids come in for that. We all went to the beach because that was the last time we were going to be together for a year-and-a-half. And she's off, and all the kids, scattered back to the 4 corners of the earth. And so here I'm an empty nester, and I haven't hardly even had a chance to relax yet because we went to a funeral of Bob Woodson yesterday. And then today, my little sister-in-law, 55, died of glioblastoma cancer.
Oh,
And just a few days ago, one of our children announced she's pregnant. So, we're just constantly in flux, right? The circle of life. There is death and there is new life. And so we have a lot to live for this new life that's coming into our homes, right? These rising generations.
absolutely.
We're going to discuss what we're going to discuss today, these important truths of communism, really socialism, kind of romantically packaged up, but what you really get is communism. And that is a direct threat on our rising posterity and generations. So I'm glad we can talk about that today, Deb.
Yes, yes. Well, has my face turned to its normal color now?
Yeah.
Because every time you talk about Washington, it turns green. I'm just pea green with envy over you being right there in the center of stuff. And we've been watching it on TV, and I'll turn to Ron. What do you think about that? And he'll say, I wish we were there.
Oh, I'm telling you, it
Yeah,
is
I
the
know.
place to
I
be right now.
know. The thing that I like about all that's happening with the 250 is that for so long we've been told that we're horrible and our country is horrible. And I just cannot see that. I am free. I can go worship where I want to. I can make my own money, put it in an account, and it is mine. I own my house. I own my cars. And no one is taking anything away from me. And if they try, the courts are going to give it back. So I live totally in a place that's free. And then or that means freedom for me. Yes, I have to work. Yes, I have to try to work within the system and get things done. But it is so hard when young people come in who have been pampered their whole life and say, the government needs to give me what I want. And no, that at that point, when you let the government do anything for you and take over any part of your life, you are automatically in bondage.
Mhm.
They are not going to do that and not require something from you. I heard during COVID that some churches took government money to keep running. And immediately those churches came in and said, you can't preach this. I mean, the government came into the churches, said, you can't preach this. You can't have this. Don't sing those songs because that will make COVID spread. So when you take government money, you are in servitude to the government. I would rather be in servitude to myself
Mm.
to kick my own butt and make me get out and make money.
Mhm.
But I am concerned, and I'm like you, I'm hopeful. I am concerned about too many people our age sitting back and saying, oh, let the young people do it. Oh, just let them have what they want, because that means we all suffer. That means my freedoms are lost. That means my grandchildren are not free. And that is a problem for me. But let me go back to something I want to say before we even start this whole process. And I hope we're going to have time to get through everything we want to get through today.
Hmm.
First of all, I am privileged to work with you, Juleen, on this show. You have more knowledge of American government history and our individual rights than anyone I know. Just in case our listeners don't know who you are, you have been a certified instructor for the Thomas Jefferson Center of Constitutional Studies, and you were a national instructor for Moms for America. You've taught history, government, and patriotism as a senior instructor and advisor of cottage meetings. Wow! You know your stuff, and I am so proud of you. You've also served as the president of the United Women's Forum, and then there's much more. I don't have time to list all of your accomplishments. So today, my listeners, we need help, and Juleen can explain some things to us. I know some stuff about government because I feel like all of us need to know it. But it helps to have a professional come in and say, no, that's not what the Constitution is saying. So we're going to trust Juleen to do that through this whole study. Now, New York swept the primaries with 4 socialist and communist candidates. And yesterday, even more socialist communists were running against Republicans and they won, or running against Democrats. They won their primary and they will be running against Republicans in the fall. We have always tried to be nice to Democrats. Many of my friends are Democrats, but I'm sorry. Anyone running as a communist or a socialist cannot be trusted. That candidate will absolutely take away our freedoms. And anyone who votes for that candidate will bear the responsibility of making this country worse. Take Mondami, for instance. He said, oh, I'm going to be good to everybody, and you don't have to worry about me. And now, a few months into his position, he's announced he's trying to take away everybody's property in New York because people do not deserve to own their own property. We must understand that the main goal of any evil person is to conquer. No matter what the cost, they have to conquer. If someone is trying to conquer you and get what is yours, or be the kind of person that can tell you what to do about your own life, then you are in trouble because that person is evil. They will lie and cheat and oftentimes physically hurt people in order to conquer. And we can no longer accept what is happening and resolve ourselves to be quiet and kind. Now, I'm not a protester. You won't find me out on the streets, but I protest with my voice when I can. I will speak out against this horrendous new trend. Look at this picture. Juleen referred to it behind me. Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it to our children in the bloodstream. It must be fought for, protected, and handed on for them to do the same protection of our freedoms. And that's by Ronald Reagan. He could not be more right. It is our generation that will decide if we're going to keep our freedoms or if we're going to live in bondage to the government. We must continually pass that on to our children and grandchildren. What do you think, Juleen?
Yeah, I mean, it all starts in the home, right? It's been said that the curriculums of one generation becomes the basis of leaders and laws for the next generation. And so for several generations now, we've been, not really taught the negative side of communism and socialism, and young people have felt like they were entitled. The government should come in and save us and give us certain things. And so this whole idea of the government making us all equal and providing for us is a comfortable notion, you know, to this rising generation of voters, right? And future leaders, elected leaders. And so, we have a we if if anyone's confused, it's our fault, right? If our children or this rising generation are voting socialists in, well, where do we fall down on the job? And I think a lot of us as parents and grandparents, have kind of bought into this notion that we're a democracy, right? We're not a democracy. We're a republic, one nation under God, to the republic for which it stands. Our founding fathers knew that, most of us citizens wouldn't have the intelligence or the interest or the time to study in depth the issues of the day. And so they made this a republic where we go and democratically we come together and we vote once a year or so, and hopefully align, candidates with our morals and our values. But we elect these representatives to go study out the issues and take the time that it requires to establish policy and laws. Now, democracy. My husband and I were driving down the street the other day, and it's called Democracy Boulevard. And he said, they want us to think that we live in a democracy. And in a democracy, laws are based on feelings, right? Whatever the majority of the people, it's kind of like mob rules. And, we know that 230 million people don't converge on Washington, D.C. and make the laws. That is what a democracy is, not based on the rule of law, but on feelings. It's mob rule, and it's a completely unacceptable and unrealistic way to rule a large nation, right? And so, I think we come together to democratically, vote, or we have the ability to petition our government, to go visit our elected leaders' offices, to attend town halls or school board meetings or hearings of state legislature. And these are all attributes of republic, to be able to go and influence our representative government, but we vote for someone to represent us. That is what a republic is. We are not a democracy. So we first have to understand some basic terms, like what is an oligarchy? It's a small group of people that have a majority of the power, consolidated power. What is a fascist? People love to call Donald Trump a fascist. That word is an Italian word that was adopted in the late 1800s to describe Italian labor unions and Mussolini in the early 1900s. It's so funny when I oftentimes read about fascism today. The modern day term is it's a right wing form of government. It has nothing to do with that. It's just it's an authoritarian. It's a part of the isms. Communism, socialism, fascism. It's a tyrannical, dictatorial, czarist type of government where they, have complete control on the economy, on the social regimentation, and forcibly suppress the people. So to call Donald Trump a fascist is, they might not like him. They might not like some of his policies, but that doesn't mean that, he's trying to control every major aspect of our country, you know? And so and if anything, Deb, when he first came in office, remember he limited federal government. He didn't grow it to control more aspects of our our life here in America. He reduced the amount of federal jobs and he turned them back. So Trump is almost the opposite of fascism. Instead of wanting to grow the government, remember when he first came into office, how he reduced government jobs and he wanted, to turn certain decisions and jobs back to the state. I mean, he actually said the states are the laboratory of innovation and democracy, meaning strong local self-government. Let the people closest to the problems determine the solutions to the problems. I mean, that's a principle of liberty. Strong local self-government is the keystone. And that's what he did when he slashed federal government. But when it came to, issues that had to do with God's law, I mean, when you understand our founders knew that the most reliable basis for sound government and just human relations was natural law. That's God's law. And, in order for this Republican Constitution to survive, people needed to stay morally strong and virtuous to adhere to God's law. And we needed to elect morally stable and strong leaders. And in order for, free people to be maintained, there needed to be religion, in that kind of country or setting. And so, issues about men and women's sports, and we're glad the Supreme Court ruled in favor of protecting women's sports just yesterday. But, things that have to do with natural law upon which our nation was founded, he's trying to uphold those type of things. I mean, he's the first president in history to have an office of faith in the White House, wanting to bring prayer, and those kind of things back into our public square. And certainly economically, he knew that, in the early history of our country, that tariffs is how we made money. So he's instituting tariffs back again instead of trying to just tax the rich, which is really unequal treatment of wealthy people under the law because their income is less protected, with that sliding scale of the 16th Amendment is really in violation of the 14th Amendment of the Equal Protection Clause. And so, President Trump has an understanding of these early principles upon which made our country so great the first 100 years. And certainly, that's one of his duties as a president to provide for the national defense. And so what he's doing in Iran right now, he knows we can't tolerate godless countries to amass uranium to build nuclear weapons and make alliances with countries in our Western hemisphere. So he's rising up. And so I don't call that fascism. I call that a man who is keeping with the tradition of our founding fathers.
Well, you just blew my mind up.
That was a lot.
Wow, that was a lot. I hope that our listeners got all of that. And I'm trying to think back. I really appreciate your definition of the republic versus the democracy because so many on the left and a lot of socialists and communists, they talk about democracy all the time. Democracy. But you're saying democracy is really where everybody gets a viewpoint, but the government still may come in and just totally blow that away. A republic is where we all have a voice. And too many communist socialists, which, according to Adolf Hitler, he said, tell a lie, tell the biggest lie you can, make it as grand and fantastic as you can, because if you say it enough, people will believe it. And I'm afraid in America, young people, some old people alike, are believing that somehow socialism, communism is okay because they're thinking that I'm going to get free stuff and I'm still going to have my freedoms. But what you're saying is in a republic, we elect people to go and vote on issues like we would vote, right?
Correct. And a democracy is based on feelings. Oh, he's going to take care of me. He's going to offer special, privileges because I've been misaligned and he's going to make sure all my problems are solved. you know? So, it's not based on the rule of law. And you get enough people liking this idea that I want all the goodies that the government has promised me, and so the majority of the people, it's called mob rule. And we can't make laws for a nation. There's 230 million of us,
Yeah.
that's completely,
Well,
not going.
230 million different opinions about their feelings is going to get absolutely
Yeah,
nothing done.
that would be mob
I'm
rule, right?
going to stick this in here. I love the fact that we have a president that's actually working. I mean, he is trying. They talk about him handling so many different things. Well, yeah, that's what we hired him for, was to handle all this stuff, and he's trying to do that. So, I think the biggest takeaway from today and what you're trying to teach us is that young people may be going to socialism and communism because they've been brought up on their feelings. Oh, poor baby. You you should win that highest prize, even though you didn't do the work and you slept and you watched TV all the time, but you should still win it. It's all about feelings, and we don't have young kids who have been taught, no, you get out there and you do the hard stuff. You're going to earn this for yourself. Am I right? Am I fitting in there where
Yeah, I think you're exactly right, and because it offends their sensitivities that they might actually lose if they don't work hard, and the most prepared, person is going to win the prize. Not everyone is going to get the trophy is offensive to them, and I think that's why they want to call President Trump a king or a fascist or a Nazi, because it disturbs their sensitivities that they actually have to compete and by the sweat of their brow have to progress and move forward, and I just think President Trump is a beautiful example of someone. He's 80 years old, Deb. He is the most energetic leader I've ever seen compared to President Biden. Now, I live in Washington, D.C., so we see the president's motorcade out and about. I rarely saw President Biden. And, I think of President Trump. I mean, last week he spoke on Wednesday on the Mall, and then Friday, my husband was at a conference for the Faith and Freedom, Religious Liberties conference, and there President Trump showed up and spoke for another. He always speaks for about 45 minutes at that conference, and then he's speaking again, on the 4th of July. Remember a couple weeks ago when the UFC, he had the boxers in front of the White House, and they had
yeah.
the big programs, patriotic and flyovers, and the women in the rings were dressed in these beautifully modest patriotic gowns, and it was a long, full evening. And then the next thing we hear, he's on Air Force One at 3 a.m. flying to Europe for the G7 summit. I mean,
Wow.
he's an example of someone that works by the sweat of his brow. And remember, I was at a conference a month or so ago when Ben Carson asked the president, "How do you have all the energy to do everything you do?" And he attributed it to God, right? When you have God in your life, he
Hmm.
expands your capacity to work
Yeah.
hard and to have the energy and the foresight and the determination to keep going. He's not a fascist. He's not Hitler. He's not a king. He is just outworking everyone. And he's a beautiful example of, what it takes to use the freedom you have to bring about good things, but it requires effort to try, to buy, to sell, to fail. That means you have to be up and doing, and he is leading the way, and I think it's incredible.
Oh, I do too. I do too. And for my part, to bring in the psychology of this, the biggest reason he has all of this energy is because he has purpose, but he also thinks to himself, I can do it. The minute a person says to themselves, I can't do that, all of your brain cells shut down. They say, oh, we can't do that. Well, here we go. And the minute you say, I'm going to try to do it because I think I can, I think I can, I think I can, that you are opening up the brain cells in your head to figure out a solution to the problem and to make it happen for yourself. I cannot tell you how many times growing up my parents said, "I don't care if it's hard. The only thing that's gonna happen to you if you don't do this is you lose." And you don't want to be a loser. So get up off your behind and go try to do this and do it right. My dad used to tell me you can do anything in this world that you want to do as long as you have a book telling you how to do it. So go find the book. And that's why I have 2,000 books in my library, home library. He would say, go find the book and teach yourself how to do that, and then you can do it. And our kids haven't been taught that. They've been taught just get the trophy and be thankful for it and go home, even if you really were not a winner.
Mhm.
So I want to give this plug. Can you see this? It's The Naked Communist. And go to Amazon and get this book. Juleen's going to be helping us go through some of it so that you understand what communism and socialism is and what it is not. And our last point that I want to make is you can just give me a yes or no, Juleen. I have heard that there is no communist or socialist country that has truly succeeded. Is that true?
That's true. Over a period of time, the lifestyle of people living under communism does not increase. It gets worse. And all you have to do is look at people that have lived in communist countries and, look at the little people that are fleeing Venezuela. They don't have anything to say about the form of communism that they lived under the last, several decades with Maduro. So, when you study the history of Lenin and Stalin and Mao Zedong and Hitler and Fidel Castro, those civilizations, those nations ended miserably. So if we just study history and that's just it. Young people don't know the history or the philosophy or the strategy of world communisms. They're largely ignorant. They have not been taught. They just have this kind of romantic uh, pretense and propaganda that we'll all be equal and the government will keep us safe and take care of us. And it's been wrapped up in a pretty bow in the school systems, and so hence they're falling for it, right?
Yes, right. But the worst problem, and here we get back to lies, is I can't stand it when I mess up and I believe a lie and then it starts hurting my life. That is the worst thing in the world to me. I feel betrayed. I feel out of control. And so at a very early age, I learned double check, go in there and find out what they're really saying. Make sure you know what's happening because if you believe a lie, you're going down. And I don't like that feeling. So thank you, Juleen. This has been a great discussion. And before any of our listeners ponder voting for a Democrat, just because your parents did, please get the facts. And we're going to try to give you the facts here. Learn why the socialist Democrats are about to lose their states to bankruptcy, disorder, and chaos. We're going to talk about that. Freedoms will be lost and people will suffer. And that's not good, right, Juleen?
No.
So we're going to help you with this. We're going to give you some facts, some things to ponder. So please join us next week and let's learn why we will lose American freedoms if we vote for socialist and communist. Subscribe to this podcast and join us again. You can write us a question. You can even write us something and say, I don't understand, or you didn't say this right, and we'll figure it out together. Thanks again to our wonderful producer, Ken Jansen. If you have any needs, please go to Downpour International and check him out. He's wonderful. This is Debbie Jansen, and I'm sticking to the truth.
And I'm Juleen Jackson, and we hope that you will keep sticking to the truth. We will see you next time.
Bye bye.